Let's talk about real earthquakes. An 8.8 magnitude earthquake that hit off the coast of the eastern coast of Russia has prompted tsunami warnings across the Pacific. Let's talk about that now with scientist and earthquake expert Dr David Whitehouse. A very good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you just first explain to us just how big, how huge an 8.8 magnitude earthquake is?
It is extremely huge. It is well within the top 10 most powerful earthquakes recorded in the scientific era. It's probably number 6. So this is a giant of an earthquake. And had it occurred in many other places where the 2011 earthquake occurred, or indeed where many of these others have occurred, it could have caused major devastation.
Yeah.
But although it was a dramatic earthquake, a so-called megathrust, which displaced an enormous column of water which set off the tsunami going, it does seem as though it's not as big a tsunami as could have been, and that the authorities have been spectacular in informing people and getting people out of the way.
And things have massively improved. I think most of us remember, first real awareness of how dangerous the tsunamis were. 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, and horrendous devastation that caused on so many countries. In terms of whether an earthquake is going to lead to damage, we see, like, we had the earthquake in Turkey, we saw huge damage there, but we often see earthquakes in more sort of first world countries like Japan. They don't cause as much devastation, and certainly not loss of life, because they're able to build buildings, to building regulations, and actually have, able to keep people safe. But when an earthquake strikes that causes a tsunami, what is it? Is it just that it's underwater? Is it a level of magnitude? Is it how deep it is? Or what is it that means that there is a devastating tsunami, or just a few feet extra of water?
Well, you're quite right to identify the human factors that multiply the effect of an earthquake, particularly in Turkey, where most people were killed by falling buildings when they shouldn't have been. And as you say, Japan, the most earthquake-prone country in the world, is able to cope with this very well. This was a megathrust. Now, what that means is that the Pacific tectonic plate, which is a huge, dense piece of rock, which is being forced underneath the continental plate, the Asian continental plate, at 3 inches a year. Now, that might not sound very much, but with the mass that's being pushed there and the build-up of tension means that in this region, this part of the Pacific Rim of Fire where this happens, you get build-up of incredible tensions and you get a sudden release. And a megathrust is when the rock actually moves up and down. If it waggles from side to side, that doesn't cause so much of a tsunami. But if it moves up and down by even a few meters, that displaces an enormous amount of water. Now, the way that tsunami then spreads out from the earthquake region can be very variable. It depends upon the topography of the sea. It depends upon exactly where it occurred. And it's not quite like ripples in a pond. It's more like spokes in a wheel. And this incredible energy then travels at the speed of a jet airliner across the Pacific. So you actually, unlike an earthquake, you get several hours notice, except in the case of 2011 in Japan, where it occurred so nearby they didn't. So Hawaii was looking at Midway, because there are tidal gauges on Midway, to get an estimation of how bad it was. There are, after 2011, there are sensors on the sea floor which can look at this. But the way the tsunami works is in deep ocean, you hardly notice it. The energy is spread out. When you get to the shore, the energy is concentrated. And that is always an uncertain estimate as to how much damage, as to how high the tsunami will be.
So a country or an island that can be further away can get more damage than one that's near. It depends how it's moved. So we know that Hawaii has been the highest alert. Philippines, Japan, California coast, Mexico, Peru. I mean, even as far afield as New Zealand have had these warnings. You mentioned earlier that it perhaps looked like it wasn't going to be as bad as first feared. What have we seen so far?
Well, we've seen Midway, actually, the thing which happened as soon as this earthquake occurred is that everybody started watching the tidal gauges on islands nearby, because that gives you an early indication of what's happening. And Midway was a little alarming for an hour or so. But when the tsunami reached Hawaii, of which it's the first part of the tsunami, you have to say that it just doesn't hit there and stop. The ocean sloshes about and you get various waves and counter waves. So you have to be vigilant for at least 24, 36 hours, because the first one is not always the big one. But so far, Hawaii has managed it very well. You've seen a few feet. It was thought that it could have been worse than that. The Tokyo 2011 was 40 feet.
Yeah,
now,
and we remember
water,
that footage, don't we? That's when we had the cars floating down, just the river in gorge took over the motorways, and just the cars were just floating around the bay, weren't they?
That's right, and you must remember that water is heavy stuff. It is solid stuff. Even a few feet of water coming towards you packs an incredible punch and can be fatal and can do enormous damage. So getting people out of the way, which they're now very skilled at, particularly in Alaska, because Alaska is in the firing line for these earthquakes in the Japanese region. They never went to the highest alert. They started off with an information, then they went to alert. They never went to a warning. So they have downgraded it. So we seem to have had an example of the power of nature and been let off a little lightly this time.
Certainly, we hope so. Again, you say that it could be, more to come in the next 24 hours or so. Dr. David Whitehouse, thank you so much for enlightening us on that. Scientist and earthquake expert. Claire Pearsall, I think a lot of us are fascinated by these incredible, can be natural disasters, and we're so aware of tsunamis from 2004 onwards and the devastation that was causing, and 2011 in Tokyo, of course. But it does look hopeful that we're not going to see a disaster, but a lot of that's down to having the warnings, people moving to higher ground and building those defences.
Yeah, it is, and just having more sensors out there, from what David was just saying on the seabed and looking at the different islands and things like that. So early warning and people paying attention to those warnings. I think that's always
that's crucial. But again, that means that people have to you must never use sort of crying wolf tactics that mean that people then don't take it seriously. We've seen that in flooding in other countries, haven't we? Where people go, we've had that warning from a hurricane warning.
Exactly.
This is also the one disaster we get where you don't get the people go, climate change. Whatever it is, climate change.
Isn't
the ability of humans to deal with these disasters by forewarning, by moving away to high ground, and to actually cut the loss of life. And again, things like building regulations, if they're obeyed, can keep people safe in these scenarios, certainly with earthquakes. But we'll keep our fingers crossed for everybody who's been affected by those warnings.